That's an interesting question. It's kind of difficult to answer, to be honest, because we don't really know exactly. There have been so few studies directly on injuries. Now, there are a lot of clinical studies in hospitals and sick people, but injured athletes, there are very few. We think it can have a good impact, but to put a number on it is very difficult. I think mostly the same. Again, from what we know, I would recommend a sort of a higher protein intake, and that protein possibly targeted around whatever rehabilitation type activities are being done. That would be the types of things that I would recognize. There are some other strategy, other compounds, other nutrients that there's some hints and evidence possibly for, but I'm not sure the evidence is strong enough to make strong recommendations. For example, some people would argue that omega-3 fatty acids, possibly through fish oil supplements, might help, but we don't know for sure, and there's actually some indications in some situations in animal studies that they've actually hindered the rehabilitation. So I think it's kind of dangerous to make some of these recommendations that you are hearing, or if you read on the internet, you'll see them, but I think people are going a little bit too far with some of those things. As far as the difference between muscle and tendon, not much. There is an argument for some, for example, for tendons to take collagen supplements. In my opinion, that's premature at this point. I don't think there's enough evidence to really support that, but there are a couple people who are strong advocates of that, so there's a bit of a controversy there. But mostly I think it would be roughly the same type of thing, at least as far as we know. I'm putting that on it now, that I reserve the right to change my mind if we get more evidence. The protein is very important, in particular in a situation where a limb might be immobilized. And of course, as everybody knows, if you put somebody in a cast or if they're immobilized or inactive, well, they're going to lose muscle. And also tendon properties are going to suffer. So we do know for sure that extra protein can help alleviate some of that muscle loss if it's done properly. So I think that that's the most important role. And so you can possibly save some of you don't lose quite as much muscle. And when you start doing the rehab, if you target your protein properly, then you can possibly make that muscle, get that muscle back more quickly, which of course would be the goal for all athletes. I think for the most part, you need to separate the different types of athletes, because there are some athletes that do eat lots and lots of protein. For example, rugby players typically eat a lot of protein. Probably most footballers now, professional footballers, those types of athletes, and strength and speed athletes are going to eat a lot of protein. Endurance athletes, it'll depend on how much training they're doing. They typically don't target the protein quite so much, but because they eat so much overall, then they end up eating quite a bit of protein, even if it's not a high percentage of their total. It's just if they're burning 4,000 calories a day, even if they only eat 15% protein, that's a lot of protein. So I really do think it depends. And then if you go to the differences in males and females, again, typically males are going to eat more protein than females. Of course, there are always exceptions to all those.